Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad to have you back. Hey, I appreciate you being on the podcast, and if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so. We're on 30 different channels, including the one you're listening to. So please do that. We appreciate it. And while you're online, please visit globalinvestoragent.com. This is where you and I, the investors, can locate investor-friendly agents. These are, we call it investor agents. We train them. In order to get this designation, they have to come to us. It's the only place to get it. And they're not typical. They actually know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate on and off market deals for you and I, residential and commercial. So make sure you do that. And if you are a real estate agent and you're wondering what to do to beef up your volume because it's down, I get the stats like everybody. Click on the Learn More button and see how you can make this part of your model. We think you should, because we average 4 transactions per client versus just one. And by the way, the agents outproduce the national average by more than 2 to 1. So you definitely want to do this, learn how to invest yourself, make more commissions, and buy your own properties. And now you got 2 streams of income instead of just one. So in any case, great guest today, guys. Scott Royal Smith, all the way from out west. So Scott, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you taking your time to share your wit and wisdom with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it, man. Hey, I love this subject. I mean, you're an investor too, a real estate investor. You're an attorney, and you can speak about asset protection, which is a major part of wealth building. And I always tell people there's offense and there's defense. Offense is acquiring the assets. Defense is protecting them. And you've got it all figured out. Plus, I like the fact that you shared with me earlier. You're up in Utah doing some canyoning and things like that. And well, I love the state. I love out west, and I love being outdoors in general. So, hey, if you wouldn't mind, share with us how you got to this point where you help people with asset protection and you invest yourself. Did you start off doing that? Was that your plan, like in college, or kind of fill me in there if you don't mind?
Yeah, I actually bought my first building and business when I was in law school. It was a transmission and auto repair shop, a commercial building that I bought for the back taxes, and then flipped the building and the business to pay off all my law school debts when I graduated. And as I was practicing as an attorney, as a litigation attorney suing insurance companies, turns out insurance companies are great at collecting premiums and even better at denying coverage when things get expensive. I just continued to invest in real estate until I accomplished my own financial freedom through real estate investing. And then I had a friend of mine who was really big into insurance and his umbrella insurance policies, and that's all he needed to do. And he lost $3 million from a single lawsuit. And he found out the hard way that insurance coverage is really only partial coverage. And that's when I got the wake-up call for myself that said, I really need to be really serious about my own asset protection. How am I going to own these assets anonymously? How am I going to compartmentalize them? How am I going to make sure that they're streamlined for taxes? How do I make sure that I pass them to my family the right way if anything were to happen to me on my travels? Because that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoyed climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I spent months in the Amazon with different types of native tribes that are down there, and just overall trying to live the biggest life that I can. And real estate's investing because it puts gas in the car. So that way I can go and do whatever I want to do.
Yeah. Well, I like the way you put it. I often tell people that real estate really is the foundation upon which you can do other things, including building businesses and traveling. It's just you have this incredible asset, a brick and mortar tangible asset that generates revenue. It's like having a blue chip stock or a mutual fund that's got, has capital appreciation and throws off dividends, except, those businesses can go away. Whereas real estate, barring some major catastrophic event, like a major hurricane or a fire, generally speaking, the building's going to be there. Even if you lose it in foreclosure, somebody else is going to buy it, so the asset stays there, and even if the asset does burn to the ground, you still have the land. That's the thing. It never goes to zero. That's what I like about it. Unlike Enron and World.com and some of those others, So in any case, great. It's a great way to build wealth and income that does give you financial freedom. So, um, okay, so you have. I'm assuming you still have some real estate. I'll people already know this about me. I actually sold mine several years ago. In hindsight, of course, it was too early. I jumped the gun too early. I should have held a few more years. But there's other ways that I invest now, passively and indirectly. But just matter of age and doing it for 37 years. It's time to uh, not be known like I used to be. That's now it's time to be anonymous. So that's why I do the way I do it now. But in any case, so heading forward in your journey, what was the once you had your real estate, you know, paving the way for you to travel and do other things, what was the next step? Was it um, was it directly involved with asset protection or in insurance, or kind of tell me about that part of it?
Yeah. So, first step on any type of financial freedom journey, right, is you have to increase top line revenue. How much money are you actually bringing in? Because you need to protect that money from paying it in taxes, which is why you need tax strategy. And then you need to protect it from lawsuits. Those are the two ways that you can lose big, right? Taxes are the alligators that eat you alive every year. Asset
Yep.
protection is the stuff that protects you from the, hey, I got sued once and they took everything. You don't want to be like my friend who lost $3 million and got wiped out and then had to rebuild. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And so then after you can get to that place, then it really becomes is about what's durable, right? Because you come to a place where you say, well, I'm actually free now, or I'm starting to get very close to free, or I'm getting onto this path of freedom, and I want to make sure that as I'm getting onto this path, that I'm not ever having to go backwards. Because once we're free, we should make sure that we stay free. And
Hmm.
that's the way we do it. The way that you do it is you make sure that you're protected from lawsuits. You want to save on taxes all the time. That's going to accelerate your path to freedom if you're not there yet, and also increase your lifestyle if you already are free.
Okay.
And then you want really durable assets. So you either want to invest in real estate, like the physical assets, or you want to spend the time to develop deep relationships with operators and invest inside of syndications. Look at diversifying your portfolio, and to a certain degree, you want to be using insurance, strategically, to help you
Hmm.
with that. But that's what I built for myself. That's the way I think about it. That's the way my company is designed, is to put all that together for people. I actually built that company for me because what I realized too is at the end of the day, it's not just money, it's time. And like
Yeah.
if you're like I was, you're like, holy smokes, I'm in the middle having to quarterback everything for all these different professionals that don't know how to talk to each other and don't know how their body of work impacts all the other bodies of work. And my CPA is disagreeing with my attorney, who's disagreeing with my accountant, and
Yeah.
disagreeing with my investment coach, right, of how this should work.
Yeah.
So that's why I actually built Royal Legal Solutions, is because I was like, well, it's not just knowing all of how the pieces, the asset protection, the insurance, the tax, and the investing all have to work. Then you need team
Yeah.
systems, processes, and meeting schedules to get your time back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you wouldn't mind, let's sort of uh, unpack a little bit. I guess there's three categories or three components to a good plan. It's um, the insurance, um, and actually, you first mentioned you got to make sure the top side income is the best it could be through protection. So does that involve insurance, or kind of uh, maybe give us an example or a case study if you don't mind? I mean, I know you don't share names and addresses, of course, but
Well, it's
an
always one
example.
of the clients that I know that's doing it really well right now.
Hmm.
And what he does, he has an active business that he runs. And his active business does has great top line revenue for him, right? And then what he's doing is that he's using his real estate to be able to help him become tax advantaged. So he makes sure that he's taxed as an S corp for all of his personal income, and then he's also using private foundations to be able to shelter 30% of his income each year from tax. And then he's pushing his money essentially into either hard assets that he's scouted himself or into syndication deals that have bonus depreciation, like anywhere between 100 to 180% bonus depreciation.
Hmm.
And then And then that's the whole game, right? The whole game was he's making money through his business, right? He's using appropriate tax shelters to shelter the money as best he can, like from tax. Then he's using investments that are really safe, that pay him a 9 to 10% per year pref rate, plus all of the appreciation that's going on in the background. And he gets back all of this depreciation. So out of like $100,000 investment that he makes, it's based in tax savings. It's giving him $40,000 to $50,000 that year in tax savings. So he's basically buying all of his investments half off because of the tax savings that he's getting. And this is when you can start to get these things to layer, and then you can accelerate the wealth curve up. Right? That makes sense, right? And then all you're doing is saying, great, well, what's the legal structure to make sure that if I ever get sued, I don't care? People can't find out what I own, what my companies are. If they sue me, they can't get anything. If they sue one of my assets, I mean, maybe they can get one asset, but it's not going to impact my life.
Yeah. So the assets themselves, not this ones like you and I can invest through syndications. We can provide our money and get a portion of ownership of an asset. But when it comes to direct ownership, and I've seen all kinds of strategies, putting them in LLCs, putting them in trust, and there's so many different kinds of trust out there. And we could have 10 podcasts and never cover all the subjects there. And also, when you borrow money, and this is true in generally speaking, when you borrow money, that money you borrow is not a taxable event, so you can borrow against an asset to do something else, and that loan is you don't get taxed like it's income. So let's see. Back to what I was getting at. Do you have any suggestions or is there a range of ways to own the assets, or what are you generally seeing out there that works well for people?
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably 3 different levels to this game, right? Your most basic level is everybody should have at least one LLC that has everything they own in it. And like you personally are really risky. You get into car accidents, you write emails to people, you do a lot of stuff that otherwise can trigger liability for the lawsuit. People can sue you, right? So you want an LLC because they treat the LLC as a different person, and that says, great, they can sue Gary, but they can't get to any stuff. That's great at a beginning level. But then once you start to have a few assets, like a few houses, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, maybe have a mix of different assets, then you want to start separating those up into their own buckets. So the old way of doing that is like having a bunch of different LLCs, which actually turns out to be really expensive and time consuming because you have to manage all these different bank accounts and it's all these yearly fees that get associated with it. The efficient way of doing that's been around for over 20 years now has been using a series LLC, which you can form. Typically, you want to form those in states that have charging order protection. So it's either Delaware, Texas, Nevada, or Wyoming. And then that series LLC allows you to form an infinite number of LLCs for free. Right. So now you can compartmentalize every single asset you own for free. So if there's a lawsuit against you, they can't get anything. If somebody gets hurt, like on the piece of property you own, the most they can try to take is that one piece of property, right? But they can't take any of the other properties and they can't come after you. So that's where most investors that are typically in like the 0 to 2 to 3 million range will stick with some type of series structure, either using a series LLC or a Delaware statutory trust. Once people start to get above and higher net worth, or they're having like a really big exit from like a company they sold or some type of transaction that's typically like going to be over like $500,000, $1 million plus in gain, somewhere in there, is where they'll start to look at like deferred sales trusts. And inside of deferred sales trusts, you're able to do things like grow, like it's like a super IRA, but it's a super IRA that can then loan you back funds where you're not taxed when the funds come to you. But this super IRA, essentially, this deferred sales trust, has all the money. It's not paying tax on any of the gain that's happening inside of the trust, and it's investing there. You lose some control over what's happening with the assets to some degree when they're inside of a deferred sales trust, but you didn't pay any tax on any of the gain that you made from selling your business or the asset. So it's one of those, it's a push-pull kind of thing of like, how much in control do you want to be in your money, having advisors do it. And it also comes with higher costs, right? Which is why you need a bigger hurdle to say, hey, I need a really big gain for this to make sense, and a higher net worth to make sense, because it's probably going to cost me $10,000 to $15,000 to set up, probably $10,000 to $15,000 a year to maintain, for all of the professionals that are involved in running that and maintaining it for you. Whereas using a series LLC and like other structures might just be like a few $1,000s up front, and then maybe $500 to $1,000 a year.
Yeah. Okay. Now you mentioned something too about the states, Delaware, Texas, Nevada, Wyoming. And I also use Wyoming myself too. Can you explain to people what that means? Like, in other words, as long as you have your entity structured properly and you have the right wording and any agreements you have, somebody could take it to court in Wyoming, and they could even win a judgment, but the best they can get is a charging order. And some people have heard the term, some people haven't. But would you mind explaining what that really means, what the benefit is of another party only being able to get a charging order against you in a suit? Hi, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for participating in the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Also wanted to let you know that the book Global Investor Agent is officially out in print and in Kindle on Amazon. You can get it by clicking on the link right here. If you are an agent, definitely grab yourself a copy. This book, guys, was not just written by me. I also included 8 other investor agents from around the country. And I didn't just handpick them. I literally opened it up to the entire audience, and it was first come, first serve. So you're going to get feedback from brand new agents all the way up to top 25 team leaders, some on my team, some are not on my team, with valuable insight and instructions and guidance and actual checklist to follow to not just survive, but thrive in this market. I know you're looking for that advantage, and this is it. By the way, if you are an investor, grab a copy for your agent. And for everybody, all profits from the sale of the book, Kindle and print, all go to the Healing House Foundation, 100%. Thank you for doing that too, guys. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah. So the way that works is that there's two different, an LLC either has charging order protection or it doesn't. Only certain states do have charging order protection as part of their laws. So California, for example, doesn't. So let's say that Gary has a California LLC and I sue Gary. I can't get to the assets and seize the assets of Gary's LLC in California. But what I can do is take his membership interest or his stock interest in that LLC. And it's like inadvertently taking the assets, right? If a state has charging order protection, that means that, like, if I sued Gary, that I can't get to any of his ownership interest inside of that LLC, right? So that's what you're looking for, is you always want to have your LLC formed in a state that has charging order protection, and then use that LLC everywhere else in the country. So the cheapest, best LLCs that can be made anonymous are either in Texas or Wyoming. Texas is great because it's infinitely scalable for free. You only pay a filing fee and there's no yearly fees. In Wyoming, you can create the LLC anonymously, and you do have to pay for registering each child series that you create, and you do have to pay some annual fees that are associated with it. But it's really small dollars each way, but of those two, I look and tell you, hey, either establish a Texas series LLC and use a trust to make it anonymous, or use a Wyoming entity, and no trust is required if you form it in Wyoming.
Yeah. The other thing I like about Wyoming, unless things have changed, when I first set up out there, Wyoming didn't have any state business income tax, right? And I think Delaware may be the center. The other states had that too. And
Delaware's expensive. Yeah. Texas is if you start to get into the millions of dollars range. Most of the time for us, those of us that are real estate investors, we usually we're not making millions of dollars in passive income like through our real estate. So that's always important, right? As you start making more money, you got more problems and have to think more about tax. So again, it turns into a big tax game. Until then, in my opinion, it's like, what's the most simplest, cost-efficient, and time-efficient solution? Because really what I'm trying to do in the very beginning is, how fast can I get to financial freedom? And then everything should be based upon how fast can I get to financial freedom? Because once you're free, then you actually have choices. And you can decide to work more. or you can decide to go do something else. And actually, most people are like, oh, I actually really like working on something 15 to 20 hours a week. But like when you're choosing it, it's much different than the have to.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing. And now, as far as you mentioned the different tiers, like there's three different tiers. But as far as geography, um, or can your company serve people across the country, and also Canada too? I think I mentioned too. I used to live up in Canada, and a lot of Canadians do invest in the states. I mean, people from all over the world invest in the states, um, and but is it are they? Can you serve those folks also, or kind of tell me about the audience? Who's your audience there? You know?
Yeah, so we serve all 50 states through asset protection, estate planning, tax, insurance, life insurance, uh, syndication, advisory, and analysis, and as well as real estate advisory and analysis. And then, so really anybody who's in that 0 to 25 million total net worth is an ideal client, whether they're somebody who's currently an investor or just a business owner looking to get into investing. What we specialize in is essentially to make you the CEO of your own wealth building company that's built and managed for you. And so we
Yeah.
build it all inside of 6 weeks. And then we have a full service team that trains you how to essentially run a wealth building company over the course of a year. Right. And it's very strategic, financial, tax, and investing focused throughout the course of the year, because that's usually where most everybody's skill sets are weakest in terms of like, okay, great, this is actually what I need to be able to be as strategic as possible. And then we do have a number of Canadian clients that will hire us as well. Some people want the strategic advice on the investing side. Others just say, hey, great, I just need a limited partnership structure so that way I can have some asset protection here in the States and still have the tax advantages that I need in Canada. And then we work with their Canadian advisors to help them structure the proper estate planning pieces that are on that side. And Canadians basically just, it all works the same, right? It's just like a little bit of different hats, right? The Canadians need limited partnerships, where the US people we're going to be using LLCs or series LLCs or some other type of trust structure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, all the laws are all based on Old English law. That includes, of course, Australia, New Zealand, and of course, Mother England, and many
Yeah,
other
right.
countries too. Yeah.
Mhm.
But Canada, what's interesting about Canada is, now granted, there's really two major population centers, and that's going to be British Columbia and Ontario. Quebec's probably a good third. Um, and just like in the States, the laws can be different between the Canadian provinces. But one thing that's definitely different is their banking system. Canadians, they don't sell their mortgages. There's no secondary market. So it's like in the States, we call it portfolio lending, where a bank keeps their own loans in house versus banks that package up the loans and sell them on the Wall Street. And you and I can invest in them through, like mutual funds, for example, Fannie Mae back, securities. But in any case, they things are generally more expensive up there. The laws are usually not as owner friendly when it comes to investment real estate, and it's like that in the states too. California, New Jersey are notorious for being leaning more towards the tenant side and less on the towards the owner side. Then you have states like Florida and Texas and that are very more pro owner and less tenant friendly. Not I'm not saying any of them are right or wrong or good or bad. It's just differences, and you have to study those differences. So, when it comes to the investing itself, um, are there parts of the country that you prefer over others, as long as you don't mind sharing, that is, and in Canada too, for that matter? I mean, I know people that make plenty of money in Canada, so
Yeah, I mean, there's really money everywhere, right? So typically, you want to invest in places that are going to have really good like baseline economics, right? Does it have like good supply and demand? Meaning, are there people moving in there, right? And the more than there is like in housing, that's just inherently going to increase like the prices and get you appreciation. The biggest movers that I've seen on like being able to have the stable rents is really going to be about like what's the kind of employment that we have there. So like universities, a lot of government employment, military, those kind of things, to tell you that, great, well, there's a lot of people moving here. There's a lot of stability inside of like the people that are living here. This might be like a really good long-term investment for me. And then you want the right kind of political environment, which is typically going to be your red states, right? It
Yeah.
seems to be as you get more into red states, you have a lot more owner-friendly type of laws. And so, a lot of people are like in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky,
Mhm.
Florida, Texas, are all great states to look for, individual assets if you're still at that stage of your development where you're, hunting for, those individual pieces of property.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I want to kind of jumping around a little bit because you're giving a lot of golden nuggets. I really appreciate that, and it's leading to so many questions. So I want to go back to the Series LLC so people understand this more. I know when I first learned about it, it was several years ago, and I'd already had LLCs going back to the 1990s. But it sounds like you can set up this your initial series in a state like Texas, Nevada, Wyoming, but then you can utilize those in other states. But is that in the series LLC, are all the LLCs in the series remaining in the state you created it, like Wyoming, or are you creating the I guess the mothership there? And if you buy a property in Ohio, then you would have a LLC in Ohio that's underneath the series umbrella. If you could explain that or kind of clarify that, that'd be great because I know a lot of people have been asking about that.
Yeah, so let's say that I take like a Texas Series LLC and I form that in the state of Texas. I pay one filing fee, I have one bank account, one set of
Mhm.
accounting books, and I file one tax return. Now, what I can do
Mhm.
is it's a one-page document that I'm able to create. They create a child series underneath that, right? And that's a child series of my Texas Series LLC. And I say, well, but now I have a property that's in like Kentucky. So what am I going to do with this property that's in Kentucky? Well, I'm probably going to buy that property with using my personal name, so that way I can qualify for the cheapest financing using my government backed, Fannie loans to be able to do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer that property into a land trust. That way I can own that property anonymously. And because it's a land trust, there's no trigger of the due on sale clause of the underlying mortgage. And that land trust is in turn owned by the child series I just created in Texas. So in this way, I don't have to register that Texas series LLC or that child series in Kentucky. So that means that I save on costs, both one-time and annual costs, doing it that way. I get anonymity with the ownership through the ownership of the trust. The assets actually transferred to the entity, right, via the trust. So if somebody's like, oh, well, I saw that Gary actually bought that property and there's still a mortgage on that property in Gary's name. And so I'm going to sue. Well, great, but Gary's actually not the owner of the property anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so your name doesn't appear on the public records as the owner of the property. You're not actually the owner of the property anymore. You get to avoid any of the fees. All of your banking and bookkeeping and everything like that is all streamlined through a single set of accounting books. You just need to keep track of the income and expenses for each individual child series or each property, which you're doing anyway because you're a good real estate investor and want to know the ROI and
Right.
basis that you have in each property, right? So it's very, very simple, very scalable, and very efficient.
Gotcha. And the land trust, which has been around for a long, long time, there you can do land trust in every state. So, and the land trust would be in Kentucky in that example,
Yep, you
but
could
this
use
series LLC.
You can use a Kentucky land trust. You could use
Yeah.
actually an out-of-state land trust. Trusts don't actually have foreign entity registration requirements like LLCs do. So if I wanted to take a particular kind of trust, like from Indiana or Texas or somewhere else, and then say I'm going to use it in Kentucky, you can actually do that, and there's no requirement for you to pay to register it or anything like that. And let's say it got into a lawsuit in Kentucky, well, then Kentucky actually has to look back at the home state laws to see what are the protections of the other state. And that's all due to the full faith and credit clause of the U.S. Constitution. The same reason people are able to use Delaware LLCs from the Delaware, use them everywhere else.
Yep.
The reason they do that is because if that Delaware LLC gets sued in Indiana, I want Indiana to have to apply Delaware law for what's happening with that
Yeah.
LLC. The same thing actually happens here with the use of series LLCs formed in Texas or out-of-state trusts or anything like that.
Yeah. Now that is some serious, serious asset protection. And I know we're getting close on time here too. We haven't even really touched on the insurance part of it. You mentioned obviously there's all different kinds of insurance, including whole life. So do you utilize life insurance also for as part of estate planning and of if so does that. If you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind touching on that a bit, and we're probably going to get close on time after that one. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we have an insurance division, and so
Mhm.
inside of our insurance division, let's say, basically it's able to purchase a life insurance policy to give you $1 million policy like in year one, and it increases by about $250,000 each year. But the way that these policies are structured is that if I have $50,000 that I push through that policy, it basically just washes through the policy, and then I can loan
Mhm.
myself back up to 95% of that policy amount each year. And by year five, the arbitrage between the growth and the internal return of the policy versus what's the loan rate means that I get to take out all 100% of any money that I contribute to that policy, and sometimes and even a little bit more at that point. So it's a way,
Mhm.
there's a way in which to use these life insurance policies that almost cost us nothing, that
Mhm.
eventually we'll actually be able to pull all our money back out of. We get to have all of the liquidity to continue to invest, but we can get millions of dollars in coverage to be able to protect our families. Because the deal is that
Yeah.
that's what we really want. We're really trying to make like investing happen because we're like, it's going to give us a better life. But short of being
Right.
able to have a better life, we're like, well, how do I make sure my family's taken care of? And so if you can if you can work with somebody who's an investor who also understands life insurance, then you can actually hit both goals. You basically can get
Yeah.
millions of dollars in coverage for free while still doing all of your investing.
Right. Yeah. You've got access to the cash value, and that's sort of like, you know you're your own bank. I'm not saying you can or shouldn't get bank loans, but you've got a you know bundle of money there that you can access to buy properties, make down payments, what have you, right? And you still get the coverage, the life insurance covers itself, and your beneficiaries benefit from that. So, so it really does sound like you've come full circle in being able to build your real estate empire correctly and successfully using the right entity structure, um, using some tax strategies, and then finally, the estate part of it is ensuring that your family is cared for if you get hit by the proverbial bus. So, you know, well, this has been a great podcast. I mean, I know and for listeners, I can appreciate the fact that Scott has packed a lot in here. So this is probably one you're going to want to replay. Remember, it's also on YouTube if you want to see the video. You don't have to just replay the podcast. But hey, Scott, before I do the final send off, any final words of wisdom, or if you wouldn't mind, how can people get a hold of you, the website, and people search you out? I'm assuming if they just search Scott Royal Smith, that would lead them in the right direction. But how can people speak to you about this, because this is a tremendously important subject that I want people to take up on.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a team of about 30 people.
Mhm.
We've been in business for about the last 12 years. And what we specialize in is how to make investors or want to be investors like the CEO of their own wealth building company that's built and managed for them, so they can accelerate their path to financial freedom and create not just the financial side of what they want in life, but also have all of the time and the security to know that once they're out of the game, they never have to get back in to the working game. Right. And the best way to learn how to do that is actually just to go to royallegalsolutions.com. We have a great video on royallegalsolutions.com that's on the front page. It takes about 20 minutes. It gives you the full look about how do we actually do all of this? What does it actually look like?
Okay.
How does it get built? How does it get run? And right underneath there is a place to be able to schedule a time to talk to my paralegal team. We don't use salespeople at all. What we
Mhm.
believe in is high levels of education. So a lot of our people that are coming to us, they're watching these videos on the homepage of the website 2, 3, 4 times. They're inside of the vault, which has hundreds of hours of videos, 11 ebooks, full courses on everything about asset protection, estate planning, tax, and insurance. So you can get super educated, just as educated as anybody on my team is educated if you want to.
Mhm.
And then it's just as simple as that. And if you feel like you're ready to talk to somebody, you just schedule a time there at royallegalsolutions.com. You'll speak to one of the members of my paralegal team for a discovery call to make sure that you're qualified as somebody that we know that we can make a big win for. And then you'll get to be able to look at what the next steps in the process look like, appropriate for you of whatever you're trying to achieve. But everybody from the very beginning to advanced investors, we're able to help the full gamut and at the appropriate level.
Yeah. Well, by the way, for you and everybody listening, I'm sitting here looking at the website now, and I see Daniel Ramsey is one of your clients, and he and I actually go back many years. I didn't. This is totally, um, you know, uh, random here, but I just happened to come across this. I didn't go down far enough earlier when I was looking at your website, but yeah, I'm familiar with Daniel. We were in a mastermind group together years ago, and we were actually partners in the masterminds. He said if he's in your client base, that is a huge testimonial.
Yeah, we're both
Um, but
GoBundance members. If you know that group, it's like a men's group of real estate investors. That's actually how I got to know Daniel.
yeah, so I was in that group for 5 years. I think it was 2020 when I eventually, well, with the pandemic, I was up in Canada, and I'm
Hmm.
like, I can't go anywhere, guys. So, when do I get back to them? And then eventually, of course, got out of Canada and came back to the States. But yeah, awesome group of people. Daniel Ramsey's an awesome guy too. So, in any case, I tell you what, for everybody listening, make sure you visit royallegalsolutions.com. It's an easy website to navigate. There's a video to watch up front, like you said. It's easy to get a quote. It's easy to set an appointment, all right there. And you get to see messages. Actually, I'm familiar with Page too. It's your very first one, Paige Panzarella. Um, the cash flow check. So I'm actually familiar with some of these folks, guys. So have at it. Make sure you remember to contact. It's if you just Google Scott Royal Smith, I'm sure you'll come up with the right person, but also royallegalsolutions.com. And while you're out there, if you could please leave a review for the podcast, that would be awesome because that's what keeps the podcast world going. We don't actually make money doing this. It's a community service. It costs money to do this. But when you leave your reviews, we get a lot more juice from the search engines. So that's why we like your reviews. Plus, we want to know what you're thinking. So do that. And before you check off the internet for the day, especially your real estate agents, go to globalinvestoragent.com. We've helped several hundred agents already. We've trained 24,000 agents in and around the U.S. and Canada directly one-on-one how to work with investors, how to learn how to invest so you can work with investors. And then we now have a team, and we're teaching these people how to build their own teams that are across state lines to match the investor community. Think about what Scott Royal Smith is doing, guys. How'd you like to be one of his go-to agents for his clients because they're all over the U.S. and Canada? I mean, that's what we do on a team. This is not your typical real estate team. And for the investors, that's where you find an investor agent who's trained to work with you. So, in any case, everyone take care of yourselves. I appreciate you participating and listening. God bless you and your families, and we will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.